Right-wing and Catalan separatist lawmakers in Spain have rejected Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez's proposed 2019 budget. The move could force Sanchez to call snap elections, barely 8 months after he took office. The minority Socialist government relies on two small Catalan pro-independence parties to pass legislation. While they're refusing to approve the budget, they say they are open to negotiate. But they have one condition. The government must promise them a dialogue on the right to self-determination, which is prohibited by the Spanish constitution. Sanchez has so far refused to consider Catalan independence. That means he may be forced to call an early general election for April if there's no movement on his budget.
It would be important for the political parties to reconsider their votes, because it is clear that the situation of precarious jobs, the situation for vulnerable dependent people, the waiting lists at hospitals, or the capacity for somebody to continue with their studies clearly depends solely and exclusively on the political will of this parliament to put forward measures that allow their recovery.
Well, let's get more on Spain's budget pain now with Daniel Lasalle in London. He's chief economist at the Spanish investment management firm Tressis. Welcome back to the program, Daniel. So we understand that Pedro Sanchez is set to make an announcement on whether or not he'll call snap elections on Friday. What do you think he'll do? Is there another way out for him?
It is quite complicated, and I think that obviously it's a very fragile government. The support that the Sanchez government received from a motion of no confidence came from very varied parties, from the Basque nationalists, from the extreme left, from the Catalan nationalists, and therefore it is quite complicated for him to continue in the current scenario once this budget, in which he gave lots of concessions to try to receive the support of these parties, and the budget hasn't been approved. So it is very, very difficult. He himself said in the previous budget negotiations with the previous administration that a country without a budget would have to call snap elections. So we'll see. I think it is a very difficult moment, definitely.
Yes, let's talk about this proposed budget, because when he announced it, it was controversial in itself, wasn't it? It proposed a 22% rise in the minimum wage, which some people saw, as you alluded to, as a sweetener to those pro-Catalan independence people. Why was it so controversial? Tell us more about what was being proposed.
Sure. I think that on one side, the government has been trying to sell this budget as very social, as very progressive. But the reality about it is that, first, that the revenue estimates are completely impossible. The different independent analysts that have been looking at this budget, from the Bank of Spain to the independent fiscal body, have seen that there's a minimum of 10 billion euro of inflated revenues in the budget. Secondly, the budget includes massive tax increases to small and medium enterprises, to families, to companies themselves, and all of it to increase dramatically the budget, the expenses, in order to appease the Catalan nationalists and in order to appease some of the left-wing or the extreme left-wing parties that have supported him. And unfortunately, what happens is that this budget was putting at very high risk the stability and the budget balance, and it was a big challenge to be approved. The Catalans, on top of it, basically the Catalan independentists, what they were looking for was actually some signals from the government in terms of something that the government could not do in any case because of the fragility of the coalition that supports it.
So as chief economist, are you slightly relieved then perhaps this budget isn't going to see the light of day?
Well, I am quite relieved, because the big concern that many of us had was that if this budget was passed because of political reasons, it could create a problem in fiscal terms. It was virtually impossible to achieve the deficit targets that the government had set for itself, and that could create ripple effects into the real economy. And obviously, the massive tax increases are already a big problem. So, to a certain extent, quite relieved. Now, what we need to see is a strong government. We need to see elections in Spain and a strong government that presents a budget that actually addresses the growth and employment challenges of the country, which are not going to be addressed through massive increases in current spending.
And we'll keep an eye out for that announcement from the Prime Minister. Daniel Lasalle in London, thank you again for your time.